Welcome back, everyone. Let's just dive right into this explainer, because today we are going to completely reframe a deeply misunderstood ancient concept. Now, if you spent any time at all studying biblical history, you've definitely heard the word idolatry. But what if I told you that the true meaning behind idolatry, the reality of this ancient practice, was far more sinister, far more organized, and honestly, far more cosmic than we've been led to believe?
Seriously, I want you to ask yourself, what if everything you thought you knew about ancient idolatry was just wrong? For centuries, we've had this incredibly sanitized, almost simplistic view of the whole thing. We tend to picture these isolated moral failures, right? Like primitive people foolishly bowing down to chunks of wood and stone. But when you look through the lens of recent scholarship, textual analysis, and specifically the ancient Hebraic worldview, well, that textbook definition totally shatters. This wasn't just about statues. This was a literal cosmic mutiny. So, to unpack this, we're going to treat our explainer today like an ancient cold case file. Here's our agenda. 1. A strange domestic mutiny. 2. Unmasking the hidden goddess. 3. The true meaning of idolatry. 4. The divine council worldview. And finally, 5. Reclaiming the cosmic temple. All right, let's get into it.
Section 1. A strange domestic mutiny. The crime scene for this is ancient Judah, during the twilight of the Davidic monarchy, right before the devastating Babylonian exile around 586 BCE.
Now, right in the thick of a massive spiritual and political crisis, we find the prophet Jeremiah. And he wasn't just dealing with a few individuals straying from the path. He was confronting a whole society deeply entrenched in the widespread, institutionalized worship of an entity known as the Queen of Heaven. He calls them out in his famous temple sermon, and later he even confronts Judean refugees down in Egypt, and those refugees actually had the nerve to claim that their prosperity came directly from this goddess, not Yahweh.
Just listen to this chilling division of labor Jeremiah describes in chapter 7. Step 1, the kids gather the wood. Step 2, the fathers kindle the fire. Step 3, the women knead the dough to make sweet cakes for the Queen of Heaven. You see, this wasn't some underground fringe cult operating in the shadows. This was a terrifyingly ordinary, everyday family activity. It was a household treason integrated directly into domestic life. Which brings us to Section 2, Unmasking the Hidden Goddess, and uncovering what turns out to be a literal scribal cover-up. Get a load of this textual history. In the original Hebrew consonantal text, the word is spelled M-L-K-T. Naturally, you'd read this as Malkat, which means queen. But centuries later, Masoretic scribes deliberately altered the vowels to read Meleket, which means work or craft. Why would they do that? Well, it was a protective cover-up. They were trying to reframe this idolatry as just the worship of generic astronomical bodies, the work of heaven. They basically did it to stop the public from accidentally pronouncing the formal title of a false goddess.
But here's the thing. The scribes couldn't hide her completely. The older Greek and Latin versions caught the original meaning. While the Greek Septuagint is a little inconsistent, later Greek revisers and Jerome's Latin Vulgate explicitly translated it as Queen of Heaven. Ancient readers knew exactly who this was. That title definitely wasn't an accident. So, let's run an ancient police lineup of Near Eastern deities to find out who fits the profile. While some scholars toss around names like Asherah or Anat, the vast majority identify her as a composite of the Mesopotamian goddess Ishtar and the Canaanite goddess Astarte. Ishtar was the goddess of love, war, and the planet Venus, and she famously held the title Lady of Heaven. And get this, she even had specific sweetened molded cakes offered to her called kamanu. That is an absolute dead ringer for the Hebrew word used in Jeremiah for the cakes the women were baking.
And if you doubt for a second how entrenched this mutiny was, consider this number: over 1,000. That is the number of Judahite pillar figurines, these small ceramic statues of a female torso found during archaeological digs of domestic spaces, kitchens, and living rooms in Iron Age Judah. 1,000. It just goes to show how massively widespread this household treason truly was.
Now we reach the theological core of our explainer. Section 3. The true meaning of idolatry. Because, as you're seeing, this was always about way more than just statues.
To really grasp why baking sweet cakes in a kitchen provokes such intense, world-ending divine wrath from Yahweh, we have to put ourselves in the ancient Hebraic mindset. We have to understand the word Elohim. We usually just translate it as God with a capital G. But in biblical Hebrew, it's actually more of a spatial descriptor. It denotes any inhabitant of the disembodied spirit realm.
That includes Yahweh, absolutely, but it also includes created celestial council members, disembodied human spirits, and, crucially, territorial spirits allotted to the nations.
So here is the absolute crucial takeaway. Idolatry was spiritual treason. It was about bringing territorial powers directly into Yahweh's sacred sanctuary. The ancient Israelites were Yahweh's direct inheritance. When they worshipped the Queen of Heaven, they weren't just adopting some quirky foreign tradition. No, they were voluntarily abandoning their covenant with the Creator and forging a literal alliance with dark, disinherited territorial powers. They were inviting hostile forces right into God's living room.
Section 4. The Divine Council Worldview. To understand the magnitude of this treason, we need to look at the cosmic war happening entirely behind the scenes of the text. So, how did these territorial spirits gain dominion over the nations in the first place? Well, the biblical worldview maps out 3 ancient cosmic rebellions. First, you have the Eden Rebellion in Genesis 3, which brought death. Second, the transgression of the Watchers in Genesis 6, bringing corruption. And third, the Babel disinheritance. At Babel, Yahweh essentially divorced the rebellious nations and handed them over to the jurisdiction of lesser, created spiritual powers, those territorial Elohim. The nations were now under hostile occupation.
But Yahweh didn't just walk away and leave it at that. He launched a massive counteroffensive. Theologians often call it the Promise Plan. Right after Babel, God calls Abraham to create a brand new nation, Israel, reserved strictly as his direct inheritance, in order to eventually reclaim all those other disinherited nations. This single, sweeping, redemptive campaign runs through the Davidic dynasty all the way to the New Covenant promises. And this is exactly why the Queen of Heaven had to be removed. She wasn't just a bad habit, she was a direct threat to the very lineage tasked with saving the entire world.
Which leads us to our final piece of the puzzle. Section 5. Reclaiming the Cosmic Temple. Let's fast forward to the spectacular climax of this cosmic narrative and see how this ancient mutiny is finally reversed.
The earthly ministry of Jesus was not just about teaching good morality. It was a calculated invasion to take back territory held by these rebellious Elohim. Jesus acted as the true temple. As the Apostle Paul writes, Jesus disarmed the territorial rulers and authorities, triumphing over them at the cross. Literally every exorcism, every healing, and ultimately the crucifixion and resurrection itself was a direct assault on the hostile powers that had held the nations captive ever since Babel.
And the New Testament completely flips the script on the false Queen of Heaven. Just look at the astonishing imagery in Revelation chapter 12. John sees a woman clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars. But unlike Ishtar or Ashtoreth, this woman is definitely not some autonomous pagan deity.
Revelation 12 systematically strips the whole divine feminine motif of any independent deity. The sun, moon, and stars, they directly echo Joseph's dream back in Genesis. That means this woman represents corporate Israel, the faithful covenant community enduring labor pains through history to produce the Messiah. She doesn't conquer the dragon by her own strength. She relies entirely on Yahweh's protection. The authors are making a bold statement here. All false queens and rebellious principalities are disarmed. Cosmic sovereignty belongs exclusively to Yahweh and the Lamb.
Bringing all these threads together, as scholar Mark Bates points out, the entire grand arc of Scripture, from the mountain garden of Eden all the way to the cosmic garden city of the New Jerusalem, has always been focused on one ultimate goal. God's mission was to dismantle those hostile spiritual powers, reclaim the disinherited nations, and finally restore unmediated divine presence in a renewed cosmic Eden.
Those ancient families baking sweet cakes in their kitchens, they probably thought they were just securing a little economic prosperity. They honestly didn't realize they were committing cosmic treason. So I'll leave you with this question. If ancient idolatry was actually a calculated cosmic rebellion, what territorial powers are we unwittingly inviting into our own spaces today? Think about that one. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you on the next Explainer.